to First Strike here on VSiN. Dave Ross here at Circus Sportsbook in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Going to spend the next hour with Nick Kalikas, Finocchiaro, Jordan Sherwood, and Reed Kuhn breaking down a very intriguing post-UFC 289 card. Of course, Jared Cannonier back in there against Marvin Vettori in the main event. Very quickly, let's put a postscript on what we saw. Charles Oliveira, wow, very much back in the title picture after a absolute demolition of Beneil Dariush in round number 1, and then the retirement of maybe the best women's practitioner we've ever seen in female MMA. That would be, of course, the lioness, Amanda Nunes, after her demolition of Irene Aldana. She decided to cut off the gloves in the middle of the octagon and says she is done as the double champ at 135 and 145. So as of right now, those belts lay vacant. She had some comments for the Venezuelan vixen, Juliana Pena. Pena and her still going back and forth. So you never say never in MMA if they're truly retired, but we might have seen the last of the GOAT, Amanda Nunes. Let's bring in Nick Kalikas right now, of course, betting analyst on UFC Fight Pass, UFC on the line, and the gambler's perspective. Always love getting Nick Kalikas' perspective. Very quickly, Nick, are you buying it? Have we seen the last of Amanda Nunes after her demolition of Aldana at UFC 289?
I think so. Of course, you always have the fighters that miss getting in that octagon or, miss the adrenaline, miss everything about it. So in a few months, maybe she'll have a change of heart, but I doubt it. I mean, she's in a good financial situation right now. She wants to retire on top. She said double champ forever. And I truly believe inside her mind, she believes that. If she retires on top right now, her legacy will last forever. And what a run she did have, man. So hats off to her. She's amazing.
Absolutely. But very quickly, if somehow Juliana Pena can poke the bear a little bit to get her out of retirement, and you had to set that number in a trilogy fight, theoretically, if she came back, how big a favorite would Nunes be in that third fight against Pena, as right now they stand 1-1?
Well, historically, you go back through and see where the movement was and everything on the last, line or whatnot, last couple of lines. But that being said, you'd have to make her a pretty hefty favorite. I mean, obviously, it was the narrative that she wasn't in shape in the fight that she lost and that she bounced back and got the W there. So I think it's just a very difficult matchup for Pena. You'd have to open it, I think, at least minus 500 or above.
Whew, I was wondering if it'd be north of 4. Nick would open it right around 5. That's all theoretical, of course. But if she's done what a career, as you said, it is maybe the best we've ever seen in women's MMA. Let's get to this week's card in the middleweight division, of course. Marvin Vettori back in there against Jared Cannonier. These guys feel like really close title contenders, never quite over the hump here. And basically a pick 'em right now. Where did you open this number, and where do you anticipate it might go before we get to UFC Apex here on Saturday?
The market opened this number actually pretty high on the Vettori side. I've seen prices as high as minus 200, minus 150s, and the action all came in at Cannonier. My true price on Cannonier is probably around minus 125, minus 130. So for me, I have a different opinion than the market. But I can understand the respect Vettori has. I mean, like you just said, both these guys are right there for the title. They're so close to getting it, but they just can't get over that hump. So I think they're basically slotted around the same spot. This is going to be a true pick'em type of fight, and we're seeing two-way action. Now, the sharp action, of course, coming in on Cannonier early, but we are seeing some buyback and some resistance coming in on the Vettori side now.
And again, when you kind of do those pathways to victory, and that's amazing to me, see where the market's gone here as we get closer and closer to Saturday. Whenever we mention UFC Apex, obviously for wrestlers like Vettori, maybe the smaller octagon helps them. Now, the other side, you could say Cannonier wants to throw those hands, and maybe he doesn't have to go that far to find them there. Does the smaller Apex, in your opinion, favor one fighter over the other?
I mean, I think historically it does favor wrestlers a little bit because, you get to close that gap and get the fighter down up against the cage or whatnot. So the strikers don't have as much wiggle room as you said. But in this situation, I think Cannonier's takedown defense is so good, and I think they just match up so well that it's not going to really have a true impact here. Of course, like I said, Vettori will have his moments. He'll be able to pin him up against the cage maybe a little bit easier, but Cannonier is so game, I don't think he's going to get caught in that trap.
You see the total rounds prop there, Nick, 4.5 right now. So again, could go 5 here as the main event. Over juice pretty heavily, minus $1.65. When you look for finishing potential here, you mentioned it for Cannonier. The key would be stuff the takedowns and throw those hands. That's why the KO, TKO, DQ prop there for Cannonier is plus 230. On the other side, if you wanted to back Vettori, would you look via decision? But you're not really getting that great of value there, only at plus $1.50.
Correct. I don't think you kind of go that route. I mean, it's tempting for sure because, like you said, the total right now indicates that the fight will go. And there's a lot of durability here, but I don't know if I would lay 150, 160, 170. It's trending up a little bit. People are actually laying that price that it goes over. So I think there's enough firepower that we might see it go under. But of course, like you said, I don't think there's a lot of value at plus 150. If you're going to look at decision, though, why don't you look at the Cannonier side? I mean, there's prices out there around plus 250, 275 ish or whatnot on the Cannonier side. I think that's a little bit overinflated.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, you're seeing here that basically the same price point for Cannonier via KO, TK, or DQ, or as decision, plus 250 versus plus 230. But the variance really comes with Vettori, that we don't believe that a KO, TKO, or DQ against Cannonier is really in play here. 10-1, it really would, the pathway for Vettori here would be down to the ground, look for a sub that's 7-1, but again, via decision is plus 150. If you think Vettori can get it done either with the hands or with a sub, it's plus 575. Do you anticipate any big moves here before Saturday on any of these prop watches?
Well, I mean, there's going to be tempting props for sure on the Vettori side, but like you said, with the submission, I just don't think he's going to get it done. He does have a good ground game. His wrestling's very effective. But Cannonier's been in there with some good wrestlers, good jiu-jitsu practitioners, and he's survived okay. So I don't think he gets the finish by sub. I don't think he gets that, like, fluky kind of flash knockout either. So for me, I would stay away from them. I mean, like you said, the decision prop right there, just bet him straight, honestly, if you're going to bet him, just in case anything flukish happens, because there's not a lot of value there, and again, in my opinion, separating it.
Totally agree with you. UFC on the Line is available right now, Nick. I'm sure you guys have talked about that main event in specifics there, but I do want to get to Arman Tsarukyan here against Joaquim Silva. This is a huge number you got to lay right now on Tsarukyan. Over 10-1. The comeback here on Silva is plus $7. Do you look at any theoretical chance for the older guy by 8 years here in Silva versus the young gun in Tsarukyan, or do you think this is going to be one-way action coming in on Arman?
Well, I mean, where the line is right now, they're tempting you to bite on the dog. Silva is a very dangerous fighter. He's not an easy out, despite the line looking like it does. It's just stylistically a nightmare matchup for him. So he's going to have to finish Tsarukyan to get him out of there, and I don't think it's going to probably happen. Obviously, Tsarukyan can match with him on the feet. He can out-grapple him. He can out-wrestle him. So it's just, like I said, stylistically, it's a nightmare. That's why you're seeing the price so inflated to try to get some bites on the underdog here. And if you're going to bet the dog, just bet him inside the distance. I mean, I think you could get 10-1 or something. So instead of taking the 600, you might as well bet him inside the distance, because if he wins, that's probably the path that he's going to win. But Tsarukyan, it's just one of those spots for me that you just totally stay away. You can't lay the chalk here. And I'm not really that tempted to bite on the dog either. So it's kind of a pass, unfortunately, for me.
You look at the total rounds. This is what's interesting here in the co-main, is that it's set at 1.5, potentially 3 rounds. It's not juiced heavily here, but it is towards the under at minus $1.35. The over, if you think we can get at least 7.5 minutes plus, is plus $1.05. Boy, the numbers indicate we're looking at a potential finish here for Tsarukyan, minus $1.25, if you don't want to lay that huge number and get the KO, TK, or DQ. But again, via this submission is also in play at plus 325. Do you think you'll see a lot of movement on the total since it's sitting right there at 1.5?
We already have. Yeah, it opened at 2.5 over 50-ish, somewhere around there. So it was 2.5 over, and they got so much action on the under that they had to flip to 1.5, and the action is still going under. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of Tsarukyan support here. And again, it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because if Silva gets it done, it's probably going to be inside the first round with, like I said, like not a fluky, because that's what he does. He's got that kind of power finishing ability. But if he gets it done, it's probably early. And then Tsarukyan has so many paths to victory here in this spot. So it makes sense that people are going under. But, I mean, now everybody's steaming that way, and it changed from 2.5 to 1.5. If you miss the boat, you miss the boat.
And sometimes I think when people look at these cards, they go, I got an Arman who's Arman, who's a 10-1 favorite. Then Armen Petrosian here, a small dog against Christian Duncan. So make sure you get those names correctly here before you click yes in some of those wagers. Petrosian here, plus $1.20 right now against Duncan, minus $1.40. What do you make of this one in the middleweight division?
This has been crazy because there's so much. Again, early on, it was sharp action coming in on the Duncan side. I mean, he's a very attractive prospect, meaning, I mean, Cage Warriors champion. A lot of those guys that come over and get into the UFC have a lot of success. So he fits the bill. There's a lot of hype around him, and he's in his debut, he looked phenomenal, despite the injury, whatever you could say, he was looking good in that fight. But this is definitely a step up. Petrosian's a good, solid fighter for sure. So this is going to be the hardest fight of Duncan's life. So we're seeing the action early, believe, and back Duncan, but now we're seeing a lot of sharp action come in and take the Petrosian side as well. So this is two conflicting opinions, a lot of sharp groups battling it out here. It's going to kind of go back and forth. I wouldn't be surprised if we see it climb back up, but then drop right back towards the bottom as fight day approaches.
Yeah, it's one of those cards, again, right after UFC 289, where you have those big names, certainly in the co-main and the main. But really, this is a deep card, sneaky, with some names on there that certainly fight fans know, but sharp bettors are really looking at. Muslim Sulikov, of course, the king of Kung Fu, back in there, almost a 2-1 betting favorite here against Nicholas Dalby. That's an intriguing matchup to me. Do you think you'll see action on the dog, or do you think that the run kind of Sulikov is starting to put together? People are back in the fave here.
I think it's a dog or pass situation here, too. Unfortunately, I like Salikov. I think he's the better striker, and I love watching this guy compete. He's so good. He's so fun. The striking is phenomenal, man. He's so dangerous, and he's so unorthodox but technical at the same time. It's just, for me, I'm starting to see some glimpse of him slowing down a little bit. So I don't know if the decline's there. I know he bounced back and got a nice third-round finish in his last fight. But still, I think Dalby, he could kind of hard it out, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. He's been in there with a lot of good competition, and if this fight gets to deep waters, I think we could see the tide kind of changing a little bit. So for me, I hesitate laying the juice on a guy like Salikov right now. It's a dog or pass situation with Dalby.
I got about a minute to go, Nick. Before we let you go here, I do want to talk about the Gambler's Perspective. I know that's not out until tomorrow. Tell the people what they get when they tune in and listen to the Gambler's Perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's such a good show. Not just saying that because I'm on it, of course, and I'm plugging it, but I mean, we bring a little bit of difference to the table, meaning that it's myself, of course, and Yanni the Greek. We cover the latest steam moves. We tell you where the sharp action is. For the hottest 3 steam moves, we give our best bets, best favorite, best prop, and, of course, top dog as well. We have a segment called Lynch Bits that James Lynch comes on. He interviews a lot of the fighters before the fights take place, so we get a lot of nice nuggets from him as well. So it's just a quality show. Make sure you tune in. And we also have UFC on the line this week as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love being a guest with you and Yanni. A fantastic show, so can't emphasize, give that a listen as well. Nick, always appreciate your time and your information. When we come back, Lou Finocchiaro going out to Arizona next here on First Strike. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're going to be able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and futures for all MMA events. Eligibility restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for the terms and conditions. We roll on this edition of First Strike, which means we get to go out to the great state of Arizona and catch up with our guy, Lou Finocchiaro. You can follow him on Twitter at Gamblu, the About Business podcast, and he's got a weekly article right here on VSiN.com that if you are a VSiN Pro subscriber, you get access to it, to our guy, Lou. Lou, great to have you back on. Very quickly, before we dig our heels into this card here, what'd you make of UFC 289? Are you believe that maybe Charles Oliveira deserves a title shot in a rematch that did not go well the first time around? And, of course, Amanda Nunes, the Lioness, hanging up the gloves, she says, for good.
Well, Dave, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's a great show, and it's a great opportunity to get an early look. And that card was awesome. I think we saw Nunes put a stamp on her legacy, nothing but greatness, to be quite honest, especially overcoming the Pena adversity, beating her, and then defending against Aldana. Charles do Bronx has to get by Makhachev. If he does, he's GOAT material. And if he doesn't, there's always going to be that blemish. And so the measuring stick for Charles is the next fight, which I believe is going to be a rematch with Makhachev.
It's amazing after Makhachev took care of Dubronx in relative quick terms here the first time out. Everybody seems to want to see that after what we saw Charles do to Beneil Dariush on Saturday night. It'd be wild. I'd be very interested to see what that number would look like, too, if that fight gets made and what it looks like. Let's get to this card here, and let's start off right there with the showstopper here in the middleweight division, Cannonier against Vettori. You know, it feels like for Marvin, the Italian dream, he's got to get this fight down to the ground. It is here at UFC Apex. You know all about it. That shorter octagon, smaller cage here. Does that benefit Vettori for the wrestler to maybe get closer to a guy with the longer arms than Cannonier?
Well, Dave, I do think that Vettori is going to want to use some wrestling. He's not going to want to use it. However, he's these Italians, only certain, well, not the Sicilians, mind you, but the Italians can be stubborn. And I think Vettori is going to be stubborn and want to believe that he can compete with Cannonier standing. As soon as he tastes the ferocity, the power, and the speed, and sees Cannonier's footwork, he's going to become a wrestler. That's my take. And so I think that Vettori better be cautious in this fight. I think he's very mundane as a striker. He's all Mr. Bully, push against the fence guy and grapple, and Cannonier has seen that. I think Cannonier is in a good position in this fight. I trust his team. I trust his approach. And yes, he's an older fighter than is Vettori, but he's also felt the power at heavyweight, light heavyweight, and now middleweight. Vettori's got nothing for him standing, in my opinion.
Wow, because normally you don't want to back the guy 10 years north here at 39 versus 29, but very compelling points you made. I'm Italian. I'm stubborn. I know exactly what you're talking about, Lou. I do look at this thing here, and you see 4.5, and it's juiced to the over, which is a bit surprising if we like the Cannonier side. Do you see correlated plays that if you like Cannonier, maybe he can get that KO for you, TKO DQ prop at plus 230. And if you like the Italian Dream, Marvin Vettori, you look maybe via decision, thinking he can't knock Cannonier out.
Yeah, I don't know that I can put so much pressure on Cannonier as to expect him to finish a guy in Vettori who's been the distance with Izzy a couple of times. And other good fighters. They both gone the distance with Whitaker. So these are complete, solid fighters. The fact that it's a smaller cage may encourage confrontation, but I don't necessarily think that confrontation equates into fisticuffs, as more so as it lends itself to maybe a slow dance at the high school prom. So I do think this is an over fight every way I look at it. That said, I am leaning in the Cannonier position, and I see the money starting to kind of trickle Vettori's way.
Yeah, plus 250 if you like Cannonier via decision here. So instead of playing the over prop at minus $1.65, I like where your head's at there, certainly on the Cannonier side. Let's go down the list of some of the fights that you like here. We got Christian Duncan against Armen Petrosyan. And right now you look at this fight here, and Petrosyan is plus money, plus $1.20 here. Duncan minus $1.40. What do you make of this one staying in the middleweight division?
Yeah, I'm staying in the middleweight division because there's only 4 fights, one that's welterweight and above on this card. 14 fights, 4 of them are big boys. The rest of them are all small. And 7 of the 14 fights are 25 and 35, where we see finish rates at 49.5%. The reason I'm picking on these bigger boys is because the finish rates are 57.5%, a little bit higher. And this is one where the over-under 2.5 is shaded close to pick 'em, and this might be the one where it ends early. Listen, this kid Duncan is versed. He's very talented. He comes from a basketball background, but he's green as a cucumber. And this guy Petrosyan has been in with some good, durable fighters. He is durable himself, and I think he's live as an underdog in this spot against a guy in Duncan that has talent, but he's probably in line to earn his PhD in MMA in this fight.
If you like Petrosyan, you lean that way, and you think the under, which is even money, essentially 2.5 rounds, is in play, would you look at the Petrosyan KO, TKO, DQ prop at plus 550, Lou?
Yeah, if I was an obstinate guy, I would, but I'm not an obstinate guy, sometimes stubborn. I would go more to inside the distance if I wanted to go that way, Dave, but in this particular case, I can get a good fighter with more experience who's been in with better at a plus number. That satisfies enough of my requirement.
I'm not sure I even know what obstinate means. Let's get to Nicholas Dalby here against the king of Kung Fu and Muslim Salikov here. Salikov struggled, then looked impressive in his last time out. These guys are getting up there a little bit up the ladder, if you will, in the age department. 38 for Dalby, 39 for the king of Kung Fu. He got away almost $2 with Muslim Salikov. Do you think that's a fair price?
I think Salikov should be the favorite based on the fact that he's more well-rounded than the Dane. And really the compelling story to this fight is we got this Russian vice grip that's a master of fight in Sambo and Russian boxing. And you got him against this just pure Viking striker. And as nominal as the talents of Dalby are, I think if Salikov stands up too long with him, he could catch a kick. This should be a really interesting, compelling fight. And I do want to find a way to like the Dane as an underdog here. I'm not sure if I'll get there or not, but that's where I'm headed.
And again, potentially, obviously, 3-round fight here. Do you think we see that this one might not hit the cards? Because right now, the over, though, is juiced pretty heavily at minus $1.80. You can get solid plus money if you think somebody's going out early or getting tapped. That would be plus $1.45. Any leans on the total there?
I would, if I wanted to get gimmicky, it would be Dalby inside the distance kind of a thing, as opposed to the total. But let's understand, Salikov is a rough, durable Russian, been around forever. He's not still in the UFC because he's easy to put out.
Absolutely, Lou. I always love when you have a pick on the first fight of the night because you can get off on the good foot here. Modestas Bukauskas against Zach Pauga. Right now, Pauga plus $1.70. Modestas here is the favorite, 2-1 fave here early. What do you make of this first one to get off on the good foot?
Yeah, Pauga, again, big boys that are fighting at 185, 205 here. Bukauskas, this is his second trip back in the UFC. That's a positive tell always for me. Why would they bring him back? They must have seen something. And he's looked good. He's got size and reach on Pauga. Pauga's just got a couple of fights in the UFC. One was against Usman's brother, training up at elevation with him now, and that was a loss at heavyweight. Then he goes to a decision against Jordan Wright. That's a tell in itself. I don't have a lot of respect for Jordan Wright as a mixed martial artist, and so I'm going to go to Bukauskas here. And though you seem to have access to some of the inside the distance and props numbers, I don't see those yet here in Arizona, but I would be looking for Bukauskas inside the distance here to try and avoid that minus 200 price.
And again, you can take the under too as well. If you think it gets done within 2.5 rounds here, that under is, you get a little plus profit there at plus $1.45 if you're picking up what Lou's putting down. Lou, we've got about a minute to go here. Got to tell the people about the About Business podcast. Tell the people what they get when they tune in each and every Friday.
Each and every week that there's a UFC card, I spend about 15 minutes is all, just giving a synopsis of the 4 or 5 releases each week that we have. We're running at about an 11% positive ROI so far this year. The year's been good, but we're only halfway through. There's more work to do, and I sure appreciate you having me on, Dave, as well, mentioning the About Business podcast.
And also, again, we don't want to keep patting ourselves on the back. You should be a VSiN Pro subscriber. You get access to Lou, a weekly article on VSiN.com, which can be very, very profitable because the man is very knowledgeable. Lou, always appreciate you, my friend. Enjoy the fight card this week. And of course, we'll catch up again next week. When we come back, we're going to the great city of Chicago. Jordan Sherwood up next on First Strike. Become a smarter sports bettor with a VSiN Pro subscription for a limited time. Sign up for just $9.99. Get full access to everything we do, which includes daily pro picks on all the summer action, including NFL and college football futures, premium analysis from our team of top handicappers and industry experts, 24/7 video access, and pro tools like our exclusive betting splits, showing you where the public and sharp money is going to give you an edge. So don't miss out on the lowest intro price of the year. Visit VSiN.com/subscribe to sign up today. Sell, sell, sell. That's what we're doing, Jordan Sherwood, as we go out to the great city of Chicago. You can follow Jordan on Twitter if you're on Twitter. Wood on ESPN 1000, the host of the Unnamed MMA Pod. Jordan, always great to have you back on. I know you're getting ready for your Chicago Bears. Big year for the Bears in Chi-Town. But I got to ask you about what you saw at UFC 289. First and foremost, have we seen the end of Amanda Nunes? She says she's done double champ. Put both the 135 and 145 belts right there in the middle of the octagon. But Juliana Pena seems to be poking her. Does she come out of retirement, or do we see the end of the Lioness?
I think it's the latter. I think we've seen the end of the Lioness. There's nothing else that she needs to prove. Going out with a statement win against a challenger like Reno Donna, for me, is enough. I guess the only argument maybe that could be made if Juliana Pena, comes out, wins the championship against an impressive performance, maybe there's a Valentina Shevchenko angle in it at some point. Because money does talk in this sport, we know that. But to me, I think we've seen the last of the lioness. She's going off to the sunset, raising a family, and just thankful for what she gave to the sport.
Yeah, great. Well said. I mean, she really was. We didn't expect that she would be the GOAT, and she emerged as the GOAT through the Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm era, Miesha Tate, and then we saw the best, and maybe the 145 division. We don't even know if there will be a division. Maybe she's retired that one for good. There is some proving ground this week. And let's get right to the main event here and what you think when you look at Marvin Vettori against Jared Cannonier. Because I've mentioned it here throughout First Strike. These do feel like, I don't want to say caretakers, because that's disrespectful to these guys. But they always feel like they're right on the cusp of, getting that middleweight title shot against an Israel Adesanya. Doesn't work out. What do you make now of these guys, of where they are? One guy 29 and one guy 39 in their middleweight careers.
Well, I mean, look, in all honesty, they are caretakers. Israel Adesanya is dominating the division, and he's got victories over everybody, every rightful challenger. And, maybe we wanted to see Alex Pereira fight for a third time against Izzy, but we know he's going up to 205 to challenge himself against Jan Blachowicz. So, look, with Vettori and Cannonier, it's the rightful fight. Both guys coming off of victories in their last bout. Cannonier over Strickland, Vettori over Roman Dolidze. I would say the latter, Vettori over Dolidze, probably the more impressive, just because Dolidze was on that meteoric rise. He had looked impressive, had some impressive finishes against Jack Hermanson. So both these guys need to come out and make a statement. I think the more interesting case probably could be for Marvin Vettori. Does he get a third opportunity against Izzy? He had a very close fight the first time, all those years back. Not so much the second time around. He's an all-action fighter. He's going to dirty up the fight. He's going to look for takedowns. I've always been a big fan of Marvin Vettori, just the style that he brings. But then you always have to question the style he brings. Like, he gets overly hyped, like really, really excited about fights, almost killing his cardio, killing his energy, that energy dump, if you will, against a guy that's Jared Cannonier, where you have to touch him a couple of times just to make sure he's breathing, because that guy has no emotion whatsoever. I'll say this, Dave, right off the cusp about this fight. I'm going to bet it live because I want to see if Jared Cannonier is throwing leg kicks. If he is, that's going to force the forward movement to stop for Marvin Vettori. And I think Jared Cannonier is going to be able to then have the advantage to unload some of those power strikes that we know he's known for.
That is a fascinating way to handicap this, that you're looking for one specific tool that you're looking for out of Cannonier, and that would be those leg kicks to stop the forward pressure potentially of Vettori. Then it becomes a hands fight, and then you think it's a big advantage to Cannonier, even though this is basically a pick 'em. The total right now is juiced pretty heavily to the over 4.5 rounds here, potentially 5-round main event fight at minus $1.65. If you see those leg kicks and you're looking live, would you look at Cannonier to possibly get it done then if the fight stays standing hypothetically?
That's a risky proposition because, Vettori is such a tough out. A guy that, doesn't get finished, even against a guy like Jared Cannonier. And because, too, like if Marvin Vettori is having not a great day on the feet, like he's going to take the fight to the ground. And we've seen Jared Cannonier being able to take the fight to the ground. Plus, Cannonier is also a very patient and cerebral fighter, a very counter-striking attack. So I think everything with how the buildup is between these two fighters leads to the over. So I don't believe we are going to see a finish, in this fight. I think we're going to the judges' scorecards. And I mentioned betting live. Right now, off the bat, I like Marvin Vettori in this fight. He's fought a guy similar to Cannonier. He beat Paulo Costa. Granted, it was light heavyweight, but he won the fight. So I think Vettori, the combination of takedowns and pressure, even though Cannonier just fought a pressure fighter in Sean Strickland, I think leads to him, at least me, on a Tuesday here, favoring Vettori.
That's interesting because, again, the finishing potential feels like it's on the Cannonier side, not on the Vettori side. So if you lean towards Vettori, instead of playing the 10-1 prop for the KRT, KRDQ, or the sub at 7-1, maybe decision would be the way you would look right now on a Tuesday. You can change your mind, obviously, before we get to Saturday. But that would probably be the angle there in your eyes, Jordan?
Yeah, I think if there's value for certainly on Marvin Vettori with the decision if you need to find a prop. Because, again, that's his style. He's going to look to control, dirty up the fight, work in those takedowns. and try and get it into the later rounds against Cannonier.
All right, let's go to the first fight of the night, and Zach Palga against Modestas Bukauskas here, and Bukauskas is the 2-1 betting favorite over Palga. What do you make of this one? Again, some more big boys in there, 170 here, but again, 205, the bigger boys here. But again, first night of the fight on the card, we like to get off on the good foot. Do you think Bukauskas should be a 2-1 betting favorite?
I think so. I mean, look, maybe it's recency bias, but Bukauskas, since he returned to the UFC, he looked great against Tyson Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very impressive fight. And granted, credit where credit's due. Bukauskas, didn't look good in his UFC first stint. Had 3 bad finishes, or two finishes, 3 losses. That leg kick. Don't go back and watch it, please. Don't go back and watch the loss to Khalil Antwi. I beg you, please. But he looked great against Tyson Pedro. And Palga, just like he hasn't impressed anybody. I mean, the loss to Usman, not great. Like I love the Beverly Hills Ninja, but he didn't get him out of there like as quickly as he should. So I think Bukauskas, took the time off, reinvented himself, and looked great, since competing at Cage Warriors and then against Tyson Pedro. So I think he should be the favorite, and I actually think inside the distance is a play as well. I'm a believer in Bukauskas getting that time off and coming back as a 2.0 version. You
very rarely in MMA, certainly in the UFC, see a walk-off leg kick, but that's what you're referring to with Khalil Roundtree. Again, don't look it up, kids, if you didn't see it.
Everybody's going to look it up, Dave. What are you doing, man?
It was brutal. Okay, let's get to Arman Tsarukyan against Joaquin Silva here, and I want to get your thoughts on Joaquin in this spot. What do you make of Tsarukyan here? Right now, we're seeing rather large favorite here in the co-main event, over a 10-1 betting favorite in Tsarukyan. Is Silva live as a 7-1 dog?
I mean, I guess maybe you argue that because he's got some power. He certainly brings that into the octagon. We've seen him finish Jared Gordon. We've seen him finish Jesse Ronson his last time out in the variety of striking. But I think Tsarukyan is just too talented a fighter, too smart of a fighter. Can work the takedowns. The finish he had against Joel Alvarez was uber impressive. I'm surprised this fight was made. I mean, you talk about a ranked fighter against, Silva that's not a ranked fighter. Maybe he's 15, but I think the odds indicate that. So he's almost not even risk for a parlay because he's so high. So yeah. I think you do have to believe that Tsarukyan's going to get this fight to the ground and look for a TKO, look for a submission prop if you want to, go that direction inside the distance for sure. I think this is a showcase opportunity to get back and show people like Tsarukyan is the real deal, and definitely needs to be considered one of the guys to look out for in the lightweight division.
And that's the interesting part of this handicap. Not so much the Tsarukyan side being his big favorite. We can understand why. But look at the total here for potentially 3 rounds. You can get small plus money if you think it gets over 7.5 minutes. Are you leaning that Tsarukyan gets this done sooner rather than later, and maybe you want to avoid that prop altogether?
I think so, yeah. I mean, again, also because we've seen also in a guy like Silva who's been finished pretty early in fights as well.
Yep.
So it's too risky for me. Tsarukyan's not going to mess around in the feet. Get this fight to the ground and get him out of there.
So as we're in the dog days of summer, before those Bears really get Chicago excited, I know everybody's listening to the Unnamed MMA podcast. What are they hearing, Jordan Sherwood, when they listen in? And tell me about what you got coming up on the docket.
Yeah, I mean, well, we just had Josh Thompson, the punk, last week. Bellator 297. That fight card's sick. Like, look, I don't watch a lot of Bellator, but I'm going to be watching on Friday night when they're here. You've got Yoel Romero trying to beat Vadim Nemkov. You've got Patricio Pitbull trying to become a 3-division champion. I mean, he doesn't have all the belts, but a guy that's going to win a belt at 3 different weight classes against Sergio Pettis. That fight's pretty good. And then, this week on the show, we're going to preview this card, and we'll talk about the Vettori Cannonier matchup, maybe some other angles that we like, and obviously get set for summer because it's the 6th summer of fight.
I'll tell you this. I went to a Bellator event in Chicago, and the last Emperor, Fedor, sat right in front of me. I snuck some pictures of him, Jordan.
Did he move?
He didn't move at all. Not for me, that's for sure. Jordan, appreciate you as always. Coming back going to D.C. next with Reed Kuhn. We roll on this edition of First Strike by going to the nation's capital to catch up with Reed Kuhn. You can follow Reed on Twitter at Fightnomics, ESPN Plus, does a great job, obviously, as MMA contributor across the board, and also the author of Fightnomics. And I like to bring this up a lot, Reed, because we use your data a lot in a lot of these bigger cards, and your data is used all over the industry space, to be quite honest with you, and you know that. How did, again, for those that are kind of still new to this, because I still think MMA at large is still relatively new, when you got into it and really started getting to the data side of it and then put the book together, how did that all come about?
Mostly on a dare, to be honest. I was just attending a lot of UFC events, asking a lot of questions, and people didn't have the answers. So how often does this happen? How often does that happen? And some guy literally said, "Go figure it out, smart guy." That guy was one of the UFC live event producers, and I found myself in the backseat in a cab with the UFC matchmaker. And he said, "Yeah, I don't know. I heard that there's some guys putting some stats together. Maybe you should go look for them." And I did, and I found them. And next thing you know, Fight Metric became a thing. There was a full statistical program for UFC to measure everything that happens in a fight. The number of variables that they track is pretty mind-blowing. And I think people just don't realize how rich that data is. And so once you swim around in it, you can make sense of some things, and it's informative.
Hey, it absolutely is. What I had no idea of that origin story, and it's amazing. And I'm glad you did do that, smart guy. It makes me think of Dean Faber in Animal House. That's enough out of you, smart guy. But the smart guys got the best numbers. Let's get to this fight card here and see some plays that you might think that you see some smart numbers in. Let's start off with Miles John against Raoni Barcelos here. And right now, John's is a pretty sizable dog. You're sitting about plus $1.85 on John's. Against Barcelos, minus 215. Should Raoni be over a $2 betting favorite? What are the numbers showing you?
Well, I think he is favorable guy. I mean, his matchup here, you got heavy wrestling on the side of Barcelos, and that shows up in the numbers. He has one of the most dominant wrestling statistics on this card now, and there are a few pretty good wrestlers on here, so we should see that from him. He's also quite a bit older than Miles Johns, and Miles Johns matches him very closely in terms of striking metrics, along with the fact that Miles Johns has better defense. And so tit for tat, if these guys go and strike and trade some leather, Johns might actually find some success dinging Barcelos up before fight gets to the ground. And then we've also got 92% takedown defense for Miles Johns. So this isn't quite the layup that I would have expected looking at the stat line for Barcelos, which is impressive on its own. I was just surprised how well Johns matches up. Still a situation where I'm going to have to see where the price goes, but I do see potential value on an upset here.
And again, because to your point here, when you look at it, it's 5'7" against 5'7". The reach is almost identical. Actually, Johns has that 1 inch reach advantage, not significant, and then 7 years younger. So I know a lot of your data points are going to say maybe this underdog is live, right?
Yeah, I look at age very specifically. We have a few situations on this card where you have a big age differential. This is one of them. 7 years is pretty meaningful by my standard anyway. So yeah, like if you just look at the stats for Barcelos, he is impressive. I'm not going to, disqualify him for not looking good on paper. He has very accurate striking and he has an excellent ground game. It's just, Miles Johns just popped off the page, and I was like, whoa, this is actually a pretty close matchup here, plus the youth advantage factoring in. And so then it becomes, I'm going to have to look back at who they fought, where did these stats get earned against, because quality of opponent is important to me, but I have to factor that in kind of after the fact. It's more of a qualitative assessment afterwards.
Well, we'll see where that number goes, but right now, again, pretty nice comeback right now on Johns at plus $1.85. I'm picking up what you're putting down there. Let's get to two guys where the age really is not a factor because they're almost identical, and we're looking at Salikov against Dalby here, and the King of Kung Fu back in there, about a minus $1.90 favorite. We're seeing almost 2-1 here against Dalby, 1 year his junior. Older guys, but again, Dalby does have a big reach advantage here if it does stay on the feet, which, it's 74.5-inch reach advantage to 70-inch, so it is sizable. Are the numbers showing you that the dog could be in play here?
Not so much on this one. I am definitely leaning Salikov here, and when I look at the stats, Salikov has advantages on both standing and on the mat. And when you look at Dalby, he's fairly aggressive. He likes to out pace his opponents in terms of volume. The problem is that he's not particularly accurate with his striking, and his defense is even worse. And so Salikov, even though he's more reserved, maybe more of a counter striker, he is accurate offensively, and he's a lot more clean defensively. He's not taking as much damage. And just look at how many times they've been knocked down. Dalby's been dropped 4 times. That's the second highest number of anybody on this card. So he has taken some damage here in his late 30s. And so I think Salikov has advantages definitely on the feet and also on the ground, because his ground control is very superior to that of Dalby.
You would think if Salikov does get it down to the ground, or it goes down to the ground, not necessarily according to the numbers showing you a sub is in play at 18-1. Would you look at ground and pound, or with the finishing potential on the feet at plus 225? Is that possibly, do the numbers correlate there?
Yeah, you're right about Salikov. He doesn't really have a pronounced submission game. He has 0 attempts per trip to ground. That's one of the small metrics way at the bottom of my sheet that I look at, and it's empty. So it's not there. Dalby actually has a slightly higher number, but both of them are low. So yeah, I think you're right. I think when I piece this together, I see a lot of takedowns on one side, potentially damaged. He has poor defense. But he does like to stand and trade. And so if he's going to be that willing dance partner with Salikov, he might pay the price for it eventually. I mean, 3 rounds, no guarantee at welterweight for a finish. But if I was to kind of throw a dart at a particular outcome, Salikov by TKO might be an interesting one.
All right, plus 225 right now as we talk on a Tuesday. I want to get to the co-main and the main event here. In the co-main, it's obviously a huge number here for Tarzukian, over a 10-1 betting favorite against Joaquin Silva. Are the numbers showing you that there's any play on the dog here at 7-1 in the comeback, or do you think obviously Arman has got every, I'm sure, metric advantage here, and certainly 8 years younger is going to help his cause?
Yeah, the stat line is almost a clean sweep. You don't normally see this in a high-level matchup, a co-main event. Sarukian has often been a big favorite, actually, and he deservedly is here. So, but then the question is, at this price,
right,
can you bank on the fact that he's not going to blow a knee or trip on the way in? I mean, fluky things can happen that change the outcome of a fight, and at that price, you're getting almost no return. So to me, it feels like, yeah, you can use him in all of your parlays. Maybe there's some bonuses where you need an extra leg in there, give yourself an extra return. That's how you use Sarukian in this case. Betting him straight up is pretty much impossible.
What about finishing potential here on either side? Because it feels unlikely that Silva could win via decision here. Almost basically the same price point here as you just took him as a dog. It's 10-1, so you get a little bit better value than the 7-1 as a dog. But I mean, is it one of those kind of go out on your shield potentials as for the upset bid if you're looking that way?
Well, historically, very steep odds do have an uptick in finishes because either it's a real squash match and you have an imbalance and the favorite is so much better that he finishes the guy, or you have these Hail Mary finishes, that one punch that changes the outcome, or a lucky submission. So when you see lines like this, you should be thinking probable finish before the end of the fight. Question is, trying to get too specific about it is tough because kind of like the situation in the last fight, Sarukian does spend a lot of time on the ground. He just doesn't use a lot of submissions for some reason. So he's more of a wrestler than a grappler. And he's also very good on his feet. So if I had to look for the finishing potential, Silva's been dropped 3 times. He has somewhat porous defense, similar to Nicholas Dalby. I'm probably thinking the same thing. And you might get an increased payout on that prop for a finish by strikes than you would thinking, hey, a grappler is going to take him down, and therefore it's a submission.
Yeah, minus $1.25 if you think Arman can get it done by KO, TKO, or DQ. Let's get to the main event here. And certainly this is going to be unlike the co-main here where feels really evenly lined. But obviously your number is going to show you something different. Jared Cannonier here, 10 years the senior of Marvin Vettori. We know Vettori wants to wrestle primarily. Cannonier, we assume, would love to keep this fight standing. What are the numbers showing you here in the main event?
It'd be interesting to see where the price goes on this one because I think Vettori was actually a bigger favorite than he is now. Now, I'm going to have to keep an eye on this. But my lean here is towards Vettori. And it's not just the 10-year age gap in his favor. It's stylistically. Cannonier is dangerous. He does have the harder hitting hands, and we see that on paper. Vettori apparently just has some sort of unworldly iron chin. He has been in with Whitaker. He has been in with Adesanya for 10 rounds with Adesanya throughout his career. He has survived rough striking situations. Even on the losing end where he was taking damage, he still didn't go down. He still didn't get finished. So you got to think Vettori has what it takes. He's proven that he can go 5 rounds, even getting hit hard. And in this matchup, he's going to be landing more often, at least. So even if he gets dinged once or twice, I see him surviving that. And I see him winning enough rounds because of his pace. He has high aggression. And if he can get Cannonier backing up, going against the cage, he's going to set up takedowns as well. So he can change levels. So Vettori on the feet, it's his durability that saves him and rewards him with his aggression. He's going to go forward and win points. And then we've got that ground game. So that's what's leading me there. I'm going to see where the price goes. If it flips, it becomes kind of an obvious play on Vettori for an upset. But I don't want to see his price go too high.
Reed, great stuff as always. Enjoy the fights, and thanks for watching First Strike, everybody. We'll see you next week here on VSiN.